Hi everyone, I'm happy that you can join us for the Organic Crops Virtual Field Day this year. I am Dr. David Butler and I'm an Associate Professor in the Department of Plant Sciences here at the University of Tennessee. In part one of this talk, I'm going to talk to you about alley cropping for organic vegetable systems. I'm going to talk about some background and general overview of alley cropping systems. And then in part two, I'm going to talk about a system that we've recently established for research at the Organic Crops Unit, where we just established the trees this year, although we haven't started yet with vegetable crop production in that system. I've also placed my email on this first slide, so if you have any questions about the presentation, feel free to send me an email. So what is alley cropping? Alley cropping is a type of agroforestry. It refers to cultivation of crops, generally thought of as herbaceous crops, between rows of woody plants. And in the tropics and subtropics, these systems are very common because of some of their benefits. This is a photo at the right I took in Central America, where alley cropping systems are very common. Lots of different designs and different crop species used. This is citrus and pineapple and banana in this particular system. In Europe, these systems are often referred to as silvo-arable systems rather than alley cropping, but the terms mean the same thing. Just if you're doing research online, silvo-arable will get you a lot more European resources than alley cropping as a keyword. And so this is an example from Europe, a photo from the Organic Research Center in the UK. This shows walnut with small grains in France. So again, you see the alley where the herbaceous crops are grown in between the rows of woody tree species. So what are potential benefits of alley cropping? The first being improved microclimate conditions for crop growth, in particular, reduced solar gain and more moderated conditions of temperature. I'll show this on a following slide. Increased diversity of the farm enterprise as you think about the different products that may be able to be produced in an alley cropping system. Enhance nutrient cycling and availability through multiple mechanisms, whether it's through use of a legume tree species as the alley crop tree species, through the deeper rooted action of the tree species, bringing up nutrients that have been leached into the lower horizons in the soil or are present at lower horizons in the soil, or the increased association of the tree species with some symbiotic associations with fungi and bacteria that improve nutrient availability. Improved soil quality and potential to reduce erosion. Increased functional biodiversity, meaning biodiversity of species that may be able to provide beneficial functions to the cropping system. For example, improved pollination services or improved regulation of pests and diseases. Alley cropping systems may enhance watershed protection and improve hydrologic functioning, again through the action of those deeper rooted trees with larger root systems and larger canopy structure present in the cropping system. And lastly, alley cropping systems provide environmental benefits and enhancement of ecosystem services. This diagram just shows some of those microclimate modifications that can be provided by alley cropping systems. Here, the diagram just represents a tree within that alley cropping system and some of the benefits according to associated microclimate conditions. Rain, wind, solar radiation can be intercepted at least partially by that canopy within the alley cropping system. And associated microclimate conditions include reduced radiant energy, reduced air movement, reduced evapotranspiration of the crop species because of reduced maximum air temperature and increased minimum air temperature. Associated soil conditions may include multiple improvements to soil properties and also may include moderation of soil temperatures and stabilization of soils through the design and the different rooting activity of the different crops grown in an alley cropping system. Research suggests that vegetable crop yield and quality can be improved through the effects of windbreaks. As I mentioned, alley cropping system research is not very common in temperate environments and not very common with vegetable crop production. But we do have information from past research about the effect of windbreaks on improving vegetable crop production. And that was reviewed by Baldwin in the reference that is listed there. And alley cropping systems serve similar functions. It's just the alleys are much closer together than a windbreak would be in terms of the overall field scale. We also know that moderate shading can improve production of some crops in the southeastern US. So for example, the research cited here is from South Georgia, and it showed that bell pepper leaf temperature and transpiration could be reduced with moderate shading without reducing net photosynthesis. Shading also reduced sun scald to improve crop quality and reduced Phytophthora blight, reduced disease in that particular case, disease incidence. And then moderate shade also increased marketable yield. And this is shown on the following slide with fruit yield on the vertical axis and level of shade on the horizontal axis. As I mentioned, this study is from South Georgia, so has maybe some more extreme heat stress than would be typical in Tennessee, but total amount of light would be similar. Daily light intervals are generally similar in South Georgia and Tennessee, maybe slightly lower at certain times of the year in Tennessee, but not a huge difference. And in this case, the graph is showing called yields, marketable yields, and total yields. So if we just look at total yields, we see that the 35% shade level actually increased yield over no shade at all. And then, as you might expect, as you get to higher shade level, yield drops again. You can also see that much of that yield improvement at 35% versus no shading may have been due to the increased calls from things like sun scald and increased incidence of Phytophthora blight. Potential limitations of alley cropping systems. I've showed you all of these benefits. Why doesn't everybody do it? Obviously, there are a lot of management complexities, maybe require some additional equipment than vegetable growers may already be using for tree management, as you might imagine. Requires expertise, experience, and resources that may be limited. May not have the technical expertise. As I mentioned, there's not a lot of research existing to guide producers on implementing these types of systems. The benefits are more long-term than immediate, although in part 2, I'll talk about a more rapidly establishing system using black locust as the alley cropping system, but still the benefits are more long-term. The woody species takes time to establish. The management of the tree-crop interactions may be complex. The trees and the crops can potentially compete for water, for nutrients, for light. And then the microclimate modification could potentially increase diseases and pests. It's changing the environment. Humidity, moisture, temperature are all changing. And depending on what the particular disease of concern in a particular system, it may increase or decrease the incidence of that disease, depending on the optimum conditions for that particular disease's development. Pests may be harbored by an alley cropping system, but of course beneficial organisms may also be harbored by that alley cropping system and the perennial component of that alley cropping system. So with that in mind, as we think about what type of woody plants would best be chosen for a temperate alley cropping system, what we would first think about is what is the desired function of that alley cropping system? As a producer, are you after microclimate modification? Do you feel that the vegetable crops you're growing could be improved by more moderate temperature environments, especially during hot summer months? Are you trying to improve nitrogen fixation, increase nitrogen fixation? In organic systems, of course, we're often limited by availability of nitrogen. Could a legume tree species increase the amount of nitrogen that is fixed biologically in that system? Is there a harvestable product that you want to produce in this type of system, but still be able to produce annual vegetable crops in that system at the same time? Could be fruits, nuts, forest products, ornamental crops, for example. Is there a functional component of biodiversity that's desired? I mentioned pollination services. I mentioned regulation of pests and diseases through beneficial organisms. Would those be components that would be beneficial to a particular system? The producer might also be interested just in conservation or aesthetics of the particular cropland, and those things may be improved by implementation of an alley cropping system. So then thinking about system design, once you have an idea of what you might want from that woody crop component, how would you manage light availability? Most importantly, we would think about alley width and row orientation. Alley width being more important here. I will talk about the alley width that we chose in our design at the organic crops unit in part 2, but in that case, they're about 26 feet apart. And this is a typical, give or take 5 to 10 feet, a typical width of alleys. Leaf canopy characteristics can be important for the particular woody species. Trees with different heights and different canopy structure are going to cast different amounts of shade and alter that microclimate in different ways. Leaf phenology is important. Generally, trees in alley cropping systems, it's desirable, at least for vegetable cropping systems, it's desirable if they have a phenology where they leaf out later in the spring than other deciduous species and drop leaves earlier in the fall than other deciduous species. There may also be ways that the trees can be pruned, again, depending on the species, depending on their use, that would improve the alteration of the microclimate for the particular cropping system in which it's designed. So pruning considerations, of course, would also be a way to manage light availability. Below ground competition, we think about light availability as a form of above ground competition. Managing that below ground competition, alley width would also be important. How far apart those trees are would be an indication of how many roots could potentially be between those alleys where the crops are grown. And the root distribution, depending on the species. Alley cropping tree species, it's generally desirable that they're more deep-rooted species. Might even be tap-rooted species in some cases. But that root distribution of the tree species, of course, is going to be important in how they interact with the herbaceous crop species in between the alleys of trees. Lastly, that can be managed somewhat as well with tillage in vegetable production systems, organic vegetable production systems, of course, which generally do use tillage. There is root pruning that occurs between the alleys, and that's in general okay, and it in general creates conditions that cause the trees to form most of their roots outside of the area of crop production. So with tillage, there is naturally some root pruning of any surface roots that come into the crop production area, but that can be enhanced through various subsoiling practices to further prune roots from the crop production area. This is just an extreme example to illustrate the concept for you. So this is from a publication from a study in Africa, and I cannot remember the particular country, but you'll see there is a wet season and a dry season. So a lot of tropical climates have this alternating wet and dry seasons. And this is with maize and a legume tree species. And you can see right before the wet season starts, the trees are pruned. So they are pruned, and now there is very limited light competition between the maize and between the tree species. The maize is harvested, and of course the trees continue to grow. And now at the time when they would be competing with the maize for light, the maize has already been harvested. You can also see the way that the furrows and the beds are formed. There is very little root competition because beds are formed to place the maize outside of the competitive interference of the legume tree roots. So largely they would be competing for water, maybe some other nutrients, because as a legume, it's not really going to be competing for nitrogen. But you can see how in this case, the competition between these two species is managed to take advantage of some of the benefits of having both in the same spatial arrangement at the same time. Other important components of woody plant selection, of course, that woody species has to be adapted to the climate and the site and the soil. It should be something that can be propagated or is easily available. To be established, it should generally have moderate to rapid growth. One of those limitations is that it is a system that has more longer term benefits. Moderate to rapid growth shortens that time until those benefits are observed. Limited competitive interaction with vegetable or with the alley crop because of its shading, rooting habits, or perhaps its other relationships with those competitive elements like nitrogen fixation, where it is able to access a different pool of nitrogen than are the crop species. And then there are a number of management considerations, such as pruning, coppicing, or pollarding, which are different pruning techniques to prune the trees to different heights. And of course, having a tree species that would be able to respond to those types of techniques would be important. And then if it is a tree species that is harvested or has a harvestable product, how is the harvest going to be managed in that particular cropping system? So some common temperate systems that I've pulled for you just as a list to get you thinking about what the possibilities might be. You already saw an example in the photo earlier with tree nuts. So pecan, walnut, and chestnut are three that are commonly used in these systems. In Europe, there's a lot of research in organic systems with use of fruit trees in alley cropping systems. I have a question mark here just because I think it's a less simple system, we might say. So for apple, for example, which is the one that I have there as a question mark, you know, in an organic system where there would be less concern about pesticide compatibility than in a conventional system, it's maybe more feasible. Maybe with an apple that has high levels of genetic resistance, something like a Liberty cultivar, where there is maybe potential to have less management interventions throughout the season. But still, there are a lot of management interventions that could be impeded by the presence of the vegetable crops between the rows in an orchard fruiting system. And so I think that's what makes this type of system more difficult to implement. In general, I think the tree species needs to have fairly limited management during the cycle of the vegetable production system, just because equipment-wise, it would be difficult to do much of that management. And then, of course, if pesticides are involved, the pesticides would have to be compatible with all of the crops within that system. But I do think it's possible that maybe some native fruits could be produced in these types of systems. There has been a little bit of research with these types of systems, pawpaw and persimmon being two that have seen some research. Biomass species are common, pine and poplar especially. Legume species, which is what I will talk about in part 2, black locust being a native legume species that can be used in temperate areas for alley cropping systems. Legume species are very, very commonly used in tropical and subtropical systems in alley cropping. And then woody floral crops as well. This is more common in Europe, especially willow and cornus species like red twig dogwood, yellow twig dogwood, that can be used in floral arrangements. Sometimes those things are grown in rows that can be used as alley cropping systems. So not really trees, but those are fairly large shrubs, and they are a woody plant, so would classify as an alley cropping system as well. Just a few more photos that I've pulled for you. Here you see what I think is potato and hazelnut. I'm not sure of the tree species here, but you can tell that is lavender as the herbaceous species. This is a photo, again, this is corn or maize with a legume species. This being in Africa, it may be the same Gliricidia legume species as in the previous diagram. And this is a photo from the Organic Research Center in the UK. I think this is a mixed array of fruit and nut species. grown with small grains in this case, so not vegetables. So you may have seen all of this and you might be asking, should I give it a try? Should I think about alley cropping systems for organic vegetables? The first thing I would say is research your options. Think about all of these things that I've talked about and see what potentially might work for you. And then if you do find something that you think might work for your particular situation, plan the design. Do a lot of planning. I mentioned a limitation being that time scale, but of course, the planning is really important when you have that time scale, because once it's established, you want it to be established in the correct way. I would say trial on a smaller scale, and I think it might be most opportune to start with marginal lands first for a couple of reasons. One, you're trialing something out, maybe not use the most productive land, but the other thing is that I think alley cropping agroforestry systems maybe have their best benefit on that more marginal land. I mentioned a number of the benefits of soil improvement, protection of the soil resource, preventing erosion, providing a lot of those benefits to the microclimate and to ecosystem services. And so those things can be more important a lot of times on land that maybe is more marginal. Maybe it's more sloping and more susceptible to erosion. Maybe it's a poorer quality soil that could greatly benefit, for example, from a legume tree species to improve soil nitrogen availability, to provide organic matter to that soil, to provide the activity of those extensive roots into the soil profile. And then lastly, maybe explore some conservation program support. Not an area I work in, but it may be possible that through conservation support payments, there may be some support for establishing alley cropping systems. So in summary, the potential benefits of alley cropping systems are well established in the research. However, system management and design is less well established or researched, especially in warm temperate regions like the southeastern United States. We know these systems work very well in tropical and subtropical environments. They probably work well in warm temperate regions as well. Options are more limited and systems have not been well researched to allow producers to easily implement these systems. So it will take a little bit more research and trial on a smaller scale in order to make that happen. Lastly, I've provided you with a list of a few resources. The first three, all from the US, so the Association for Temperate Agroforestry, the Center for Agroforestry at the University of Missouri, and the National Agroforestry Center of the USDA. All of those links will provide a number of other resources on those sites. And then a resource from the UK, the Organic Research Center, that was one of the photos that I provided earlier, was from their site, but they have a number of resources as well available on their website. So I hope you have enjoyed the talk and the rest of the Organic Crops Virtual Field Day. And as I mentioned, if you do have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Thank you.